Yeah. I mean, the beauty of your book and the beauty of what you're doing is making this real, making it normal, making it natural. Because the truth is, I mean, if I start to share my story about my nature experience, I promise you, other people have similar stories. And you're like, wow, we know what? Something like that happened to me too.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth Podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own. Welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Dr. Danielle Zanzarov, and let me tell you a little bit about Danielle. She is passionate about health and wellness. In addition to her BA in psychology from Columbia University, she attained a PhD in natural medicine, as well as an MS in human nutrition and functional medicine from the University of the Western States. So welcome, Danielle.
Hello, Maureen. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah. It's funny. So now you're in Texas.
I am.
Long Islander, or at least that's where we met. And yeah, so it's just really wonderful to kind of catch up with you again after all these years. I always like to kind of get a little bit of information about my guest's experience in nature as a child. Do you have any connection there as a child?
Well, I'll tell you, Maureen, when I think about my childhood, we grew up in the Long Island suburbs and didn't spend all that much time in nature. But I remember there was this one place that we went upstate New York as a kid that was in the mountains upstate. And it was a space of home for me. I feel like the normal day to day on Long Island, there's sort of almost like this little bit of chaotic energy, and then being up in the mountains just brought this calm sense for me. And I remember even as a kid, my favorite place became being up in the mountains. And, Long Island, we have the beach, but the beach was still not my favorite place.
Oh, interesting. So, yeah, the mountains. It is interesting being a product of Long Island myself. My whole life I've lived here. And when I go up to the mountains and I come back,
Mhm.
I just miss having that view.
Yeah, I think there is something very powerful and grounding, not just about the mountains itself, and the really it's the majesty, right? It's the majesticness of those mountains, but also like all the trees. I mean, each one of those trees, those plants and bushes, like it's all so alive. Now, in stark contrast, I live in northern Texas now, and it is wrecked. It is completely wide open and it's got its own beauty and its own sense of peace, but it's very different than all of that energy that comes from being in the mountains with the trees. And I love trees. I mean, I've only got two on my entire yard, but I love trees.
Yeah. And it is pretty interesting to think about growing up on Long Island in the suburbs. I feel like we should have had a little bit more of a connection to nature, but I feel just like you. I felt like, yeah, I would go outside and play in the tiny little woods, which was just like a postage stamp
Right.
of land that wasn't claimed yet and now has been claimed because
Of course.
it's big enough for a house now, but in the 60s and 70s it wasn't. But it is pretty crazy how, yeah, we were disconnected. I mean, Long Island is just one town after another. Like you don't even know where one town ends and one begins because it's just a blur of suburbia.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that even though where I am right now, it's super flat and there aren't a lot of trees, the vastness of it, right? The openness, the feeling like, wow, there's a immense space that surrounds us is what brings that grounding and that comfort. I mean, I look out my window in the morning and I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. And it's not mountains, but there's still something really special. And I think it does come to that. Because if you think about it, I'm just processing through as we're speaking here, but if you think about it, when you're looking out at the mountains and you're looking at that sea, you do feel that expansiveness. And it's almost like it makes us part of something that's really important and significant. It reminds us that we are a part of this world and an important part of this world. And yet there's still that humbling side of things like, wow, there's all of that. And then there's just me, but I'm still important in this space.
Yes. It's not looking out your window and just seeing another house or
Right.
a road. There's this expansive view. I like that word expansive because and that reminds me of I guess we drove cross country 35 years ago.
Mhm.
And when we hit like Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana, it's like big sky country. And
Yes.
like you said, like you could see like forever. But the sky, that was really to me kind of the star
Oh my gosh.
was
Yes.
the expansiveness of the sky.
Yeah, I always say here, like, we've got the most gorgeous sky ever. The colors that come through, the way the clouds look. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of storms because there's too many tornadoes close, but when those storms come in to watch the lightning like you've never seen it before, it is something pretty extraordinary. You've got to like have like absolute respect for Mother Nature. Like, wow, you know, the power, the beauty, the vastness, all of it.
Yeah, yeah. The awe that it gives us
Mhm.
that yeah, it brings us down to our very tiny piece of the whole.
Yeah. I think the other important thing, Maureen, is that when we start to focus on nature and all of what it has to offer, it also sometimes takes our focus off just ourselves. So, like if you're having a bad day or you're anxious about something or something's going around in circles in your mind, because we all have that. I think when we step outside, right, and we can just focus on something in nature, even if it is in our backyard, all of a sudden it brings us to a greater sense of peace. It's magical is the word that comes to mind because it's like a button. It's like, oh, if I just spend time focusing on the tree in my front yard, or I look at the way that ants are walking around outside, or I look at the beautiful clouds in the sky and the way they're moving, all of a sudden it's like our troubles become so less significant. Or for me, I like to think that nature talks to me, right? Like I always feel like when I need that guidance, when I need that support, like I know I need to get outside. The truth is I probably spend too much time inside, just like everybody else in front of the computer, working or doing things or so on and so forth. But, you know, I remember um, sometime last year, I remember when our little area where we live, it was, still the houses were being built. And so it was pretty like all wide open. And so I'd go out for my run every morning. And I remember one morning just kind of saying, universe, I need guidance. I need direction. Like give that to me. And I remember as I was running down the street, the sun was right there in front of me. And so I had a conversation with the sun, like almost like an argument with the sun. Like, what is going on? What do you want from me, God? Like what is it? And I came, and the block's pretty long. And as I'm running and like total transformation in being in that space of what do you want from me to, okay, I got this. I got this. All right, let's do it. And it was the sun, right? It was all their energy from the sun being like literally like directing my path. It was like, here you go, take this.
Awesome. Yeah, I do feel like nature is constantly giving us messages, constantly trying to pull us out of our heads
Oh, yes.
into the present moment.
Yeah.
And when we allow that to happen, like you said, magic occurs.
Yeah. I would say like in my practice, a lot of our, I work with a lot of women who are in that, like 45 to 65 range. The hormones start doing all their stuff and they're not spending as much time outdoors. They're not spending time where they're literally grounded. And we can talk about grounding too, because it's so powerful.
Mm.
But one of the things that we are consistently recommending is get outside. Just get outside, because when we start to add in that outside element, it changes everything. I know for me personally, even if it's cold or even if it's hot, it's never too hot in the morning, but even if it's real cold in the morning, I still get outside, sometimes in my socks, sometimes in my absolute bare feet, and just stand on the ground, look up at the sun as it's rising, or if it's cloudy, look up at where it would normally be coming up and just take that time to stabilize. I would say it's more grounding, like grounding, not just in the sense of the word grounding as it's been coined today, but just getting myself back to that space of being centered.
Yeah. It's like that still point.
Yeah. Well,
Do what
we are nature. We are a part of nature. We are this amazing, magnificent beings that were created. And so just taking the time to reconnect with the earth and all that we are, it's just no wonder it's powerful, right? It's supposed to be that way.
Absolutely. Yes. And we're coming back to that realization, more and more of us, which is very hopeful.
Yes.
Very hopeful. So, do you have a story or two to share with us about an experience in nature that moved you in some way?
Hmm. I would say one of my more recent experiences, I was in the absolute beautiful space of the Sundance. I was in the Sundance Resort Mountains up in Utah, and the place is just stunning. The earth energy in that environment, it's just incredible. And I had gotten up early in the morning to go for my hike slash jog slash run slash walk. And I remember as I was on my journey, it was almost like I was being called. And I'm on the path jogging and you got to be careful because there's a lot of rocks and tree roots and all that stuff. So, wasn't a very fast jog, but as I went past this tree, it was almost like the tree called to me. And I know that sounds weird, but I was like, what is that? And I literally had to like turn myself around and go back to that tree. And, I'm always nature is a place for me where I think about the bigger things in my life. I think about my purpose. I think about my mission. I think about what's next for me. I'm thinking about what's working, what's not working. Where do I need to create change for myself, for others? It's like it is the environment where all these things sort of come flooding in. You certainly need a journal. When you're out in nature. And I had to turn around and backtrack and just literally, I took my shoes off, got my feet planted barefoot on the ground, and just put my hands on this tree. And it was electric. And I knew in that moment that everything was as it should be in the world. And that everything was right. And I remember like I have almost like this unconscious. I mean, I'm not having a verbal conversation. It's kind of like what's going on internally. I'm like, okay, I'm coming back to this tree. Like this is now my tree. This tree needed to feel me. And I needed to feel this tree. And I know it sounds totally strange, right? Like, what is she talking about? The tree needs to feel her. She needs to feel the tree. But the connection to life, to the universe, to God, to all of it, to that oneness was just so profound in that moment that I don't know, I felt grounded and centered for like days and days after, just from that one magical moment, from just kind of hearing that little voice that was like, "Hey, come here." Sometimes you check into yourself, you say, "Am I crazy?"
Oh, wow.
But then, I mean, I'm not the only one who has these stories. I know I've read your book, so these stories are everywhere, and it makes you really start to believe and really feel. We dismiss these things. We dismiss these connections with life, with the earth, with nature, with ourselves, right? When yet they're really what we authentically need as human beings. At least that's right.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's that is what's real.
Yeah.
That is real.
Yeah.
That relationship and that experience that you had with that tree. So as you approached it and felt the tree, you got this kind of electrical charge within your body.
Literally, yeah. People say like hug a tree and all that, but it really, you think about it, like in actuality, that tree has probably been there for goodness knows how long, right? Probably 100 years, maybe more. I don't know, but and then its roots are going all the way down and it's connected to this vast network of all these other trees. And, you know, I think the trees know, right? They're all connected. They've been there. And even in spaces where I am now, where it's wide open, there is still that connection just through the earth itself, so we're all connected.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that it's like there's wisdom in nature that we've got to tap into more often.
yes. Yes, so that tree reached out to you because it felt your longing, your needing to kind of reconnect, so it was like, "You can do it with me. I'm
Yeah.
here." Then what the tree I do believe very firmly that the tree also needed your energy. You
Yeah.
know, we always well, we tend to think of nature as a resource, right? I mean, that is kind of the real Western view
Yes.
of of it being a resource, but even in a more new agey view, some
Right.
people are thinking of it as a resource at like a spiritual level, like, "I need to be
Right.
nourished, I need to be supported, I need to be brought back into balance and to be grounded," but the thing that we're not realizing is it's reciprocal.
Absolutely.
So the tree needs us as well. It needs our acknowledgement of its consciousness and as another living being here. Because we're running by these trees or walking by them without any acknowledgement that they're another sentient being.
Yeah.
And then when we stop and we take a respectful connection, we're we're making them feel good too,
Right.
acknowledged
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
supported.
Yeah. Connection is the word that comes to mind, right? We're creating that greater sense of respect for one another, coming connected for us with nature. And then in that too, we become more connected, I think, with ourselves, and it's kind of like this reinforcing cycle, you know?
Yes. Yes. And yeah, definitely. It's the more we do these types of connections, the more we're open to it, the more we see it, the more we feel it. Now, another person taking a run through the woods, or maybe Danielle, another day.
Uh-huh.
Um, what do you think the difference between how you showed up that day, that moment, taking the walk through the woods, and maybe another day where you wouldn't have heard the tree?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good question. Huh. So vulnerability is the word think comes to mind. I think when we're, on another day, if I wasn't really present, not in the moment, but just kind of doing something else or scrolling through my phone while walking or something like that, I would have completely missed that moment. But for me, when I'm in nature, especially, it is an opportunity for me to be vulnerable, to be open to whatever it is that moment is going to give, right? To be truly present in what's there versus
Right.
anything else. I think, and for me personally, it's not just woods, it's not just trees, it's not just mountains, but when I find myself at the beach, it's the same kind of thing. I love La Jolla, California, and I love the beaches there. You've got the beach and then you've got the little rocks. And when I go to visit there, I go for my run and then I go down to the beach on my way back. And I always bring my journal because I know that something's going to open up while I'm sitting there on the rock looking at the water. I don't know what it is, but I'm just open to receiving whatever it is that message is. And so that vulnerability, that being open, I think open and present, right, is what makes the difference as to whether or not we can take in what's being offered.
Yes. 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 I use that term vulnerable or vulnerability a lot, and open-heartedness, 'cause
Mm.
they go hand in hand.
Yes.
They go hand in hand. So, have you ever had any other story or experience that kind of was similar to what you just described with a tree or with another nature being and feeling that kind of electromagnetic energy? Just curious.
I would say it does occur pretty often. I tend to be very sensitive to energies, right? Part of the work that I do, I use kinesiologic testing, so I'm always I can feel things a lot because I'm very sensitive to it. I've practiced for almost 20 years. This is like part of my life, and too, just kind of being in the feng shui world, even environments and stuff, like you can walk it, you can feel stuff. So I would say, absolutely. This specific story or this specific event, I mean, it just stands out for me because it was just so electrifying. I mean, I know when I get on the ground in the morning and I get myself barefoot, or sometimes I even sit on the ground and really connect to the earth, I know that I can feel that connection. But this was just a completely different level of that.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and and sometimes too, I think, there's times when I've been connected to nature where it's not just that sensation brings up all other thoughts, feelings, emotions, in it. They're collapsed in a different way than what this specific event was. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And I think, you know, sometimes we have to have a stronger, like, okay, this is it. Like, there's no doubting this.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes, like you said, am I nuts? Or other
Right.
you know, I'm I'm really reflecting a lot about that and how that feeling of being weird, um, perhaps being a kook, when you maybe wanna share the story and then you're a little reluctant because you're like, this how is sharing this going to change, the situation I'm in with this person or this group of people? Um, that's another thing. It is vulnerability,
Yes.
sharing these stories. So we have to be willing to be vulnerable
Yeah,
on so
absolutely.
many levels.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty of your book and the beauty of what you're doing is making this real, making it normal, making it natural. Because the truth is, I mean, if I start to share my story about my nature experience, I promise you, other people have similar stories. And you're like, wow, you know what? Something like that happened to me too. And then they're moving into their story. And all of a sudden, we realize that what we've just been hiding from each other is actually part of what is happening naturally, normally. And the truth is, being connected to nature, having these experiences, being in touch with the earth and with ourselves, it is part of being a human being. It's that precious part that can't be suppressed. Connecting with ourselves is so vital.
Yeah, and I think it is so important for our mental health and well-being because when we have these experiences, they're really joyful
Yeah.
and they just light us up. I mean, they fill our energy or our heart with light and love and compassion.
Yes.
So they have such a power to uplift us.
Yeah, it's super healing. I mean, I had a bad day one day, feeling overwhelmed, like nobody's helping clean in the house and all that kind of normal stuff. And I was just like, you know what? I've got to get out of here. And I literally just got in my car and started driving. And there was a sign that said like nature preserve. I'm like, I'm going there. And just getting myself into that space of nature, it's like everything shifts. And you can be like, oh, look at that. I'm just in this silly space. I'm overwhelmed. Like, come on, Danielle. Like, work it out. Things aren't that bad. There's so much to be grateful for. And little things like doing the dishes or mopping the floors, like they're really insignificant. It changes us because it takes us out of our little world where things seem so maybe overwhelming or chaotic or where we can literally, if you think about it, if you're in a little world and there's lots of movement going in that little world, it is pure chaos. If you all of a sudden open up your world and you have that same movement, it's a vastly different experience. So yeah, we
I
love
love that.
that and it's powerful.
I love that kind of visual of and that sensation of kind of like not boxing in, but encircling all this chaotic energy.
Yeah,
It's like the concentration of a tornado, like we talked in the
exactly.
beginning.
Yeah.
It's real compact.
Yes.
If you allow this expansion, it dissipates.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, energy is neither positive nor negative in and of itself, right? It's the way that it's directed, the way that it's used that really makes the difference. So, if you think about it in our lives today, I mean, we've got this upticking anxiety, depression, health concerns, overwhelm, violence, all of the stuff that's happening in our world. But if you notice, our worlds have just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We're not leaving our homes every day. Because now we're all, working. Well, not all, but a lot of people are working from home or they're just going from work to home and then they're on the phones all the time. So we're literally, most of our life lives right here, and so no wonder why there's so much of this angst, so much of that high vibrational movement that just sends us into a tizzy when what our body needs is to just relax.
Yes, yes, and it's something we need now more than ever before.
Yes. And Maureen, the thing is, like, I'm talking about these experiences where, like, I'm in these really amazing sacred spaces. It doesn't take that, right? So you could just be out in your backyard or sitting near a tree, but you don't even need to be honest, like, you don't even need to go out. When I start to feel myself moving into like a higher anxiety or starting to feel that vibration moving, you know, so my practice is to ground myself in the sense that I have that sacred space in nature in my mind, right? There's this beautiful field of purple flowers and this pathway right through that field of purple flowers. On the other side, there's this gorgeous waterfall because waterfalls for me are just amazing. and calming and soothing. There's this gorgeous waterfall. And then next to the waterfall, there is this big, beautiful, abundant tree. And I just take myself over to that tree in my mind's eye, and I sit myself down along the trunk. And right at the base of the tree, I just ground myself, right? In that vision, I close my eyes. I allow my own roots to enter and meld with the roots of that tree. And like I can come back to this place of peace at any time without even leaving my chair, so to speak, all in my mind's eye.
Yes. Oh, it is such a powerful practice of using visualization, and I know I learned to I have my own kind of private place in Maui that is one of my go-to places, sitting on the beach, and it was a real experience. But yeah, to to create just the environment, we have that in our imagination, all the tools we need.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think we've become so technology driven, and there's pros and cons, right? Like we use technology, we're using it now. So not saying it's bad, but we've become so driven to technology and these amazing things that technology does that we've forgotten the beautiful things that nature does. I mean, even just going back, like in my field, it's like, well, the plants, they heal us. Like for whatever illness or disease or what have you that there is, there's actually nature gives us a remedy directly for that, And so we've got to come back, I think, to that place of real connection, real balance, and back to the simplicity. Because I say simplicity, but nature is not simplistic in any way, shape, or form. It's magnificent. It's like, when you start to look at the creations that are in nature, you're like, oh my God, it's mind blowing. It's more magnificent than what we're doing with technology, for sure. And yet we've sort of stepped away from that in our day and age.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, the more technology, the more nature we need in our lives,
Mhm.
just to
Abs-
kind of balance it out, right? We constantly need that counterbalance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That yin
Um,
and yang.
yeah. And I love, we were talking a little bit about that chaotic energy, and I brought up the tornado. I love the metaphor that nature provides us. And that is a lot how nature speaks to us, isn't it? When
Yeah,
we're out experiencing nature, it's we're tapping into the metaphor of what is occurring in the natural environment.
absolutely. Well, I think it's really important that we are in tune with the natural rhythms of the earth within ourselves, like, and the further and further we get away from those natural rhythms, the more chaos, the more dis-ease, the more we actually
Totally.
suffer. When we're listening to our bodies, when we're paying attention to nature, when I mean, think about it, when the time of the year where we've got longer daylight and less daylight,
Right.
if we're not mindful of that, it totally screws with our internal systems.
Yeah. No wonder we're exhausted.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're not hibernating like I was reading lately that there were some they believe that there were some aspects of human civilizations that didn't do hibernation as we think of with, say, bears, but like a partial hibernation where we did sleep a lot longer in the
Sure.
wintertime and then only got up for a few hours and then, or maybe we would have kind of broken 14-hour stretch of sleep, but we would get up and maybe eat a little something and go back. And it's really incredible how we live with all this technology and of course artificial light
Yeah,
allows us to extend our days regardless of what time of year it is, but really we should be more in a lower yin experience where we just kind of self-care and go to bed early, wake up a little late if we can.
Yes. Yeah. It's important to listen to those cues. Just like cues are out there in nature, like, nature's telling us, "Hey, I'm getting polluted. Hey, you need to pay attention. Hey, like look at all this stuff." Our internal nature does that as well. So I agree. We have to pay attention to what those rhythms are, align with them. Otherwise, we're in conflict. And when we're in conflict, it just, doesn't always end well.
Right. Absolutely. So as we finish this time, is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with or any other story you'd like to share?
Hmm. Great question. I think, I think the important thing to leave people with is number one, get out into nature, get your shoes off, touch the ground, look at the sky, and be vulnerable to the awe that there is. And I often find that when we look to nature for the answers that we're seeking, it's there. We've just got to open our ears to listen.
Very wise words. Thank you so much, Danielle, for coming on with me today.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me. This has been fun. And I hope that this sparks even more and more stories about nature and the power of it all, because it is, like you said, an enchanted earth.
It is. And for all of you that are watching or listening, please like, subscribe, and most of all, I would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below and let us know what you think about this episode. And thank you so much and have a beautiful day, everybody.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Comment below, share, and most of all, please hit the subscribe button so that you'll hear when we publish another inspiring episode. You can visit us at luminous-spaces.com for more information on our online courses, retreats, and offerings. Thank you and have a magical day.